Hey there. So yesterday I was talking to the team at ConvertKit about a really interesting problem that they had. So they're bringing on a new customer, and this customer has a very specific need that they weren't quite sure how to tackle. And this need was that they wanted it so whenever they send an email, 30% of the recipients of that email would see a paywall. The other 70% would see the full email. Now, the thing is, they needed it to change every time they sent the email. So it wasn't as simple as to just say, we're going to randomly make 30% of our list tagged with like the paywall tag and the other 70% not tagged with that, and then just have a check there. They need this to happen every time they send an email. So they reached out and said, hey, you do a lot with Liquid. Is there anything that you think we could use Liquid for to achieve this end goal? And I was very happy to accommodate because this is actually exactly what I do with my own newsletter. Now, I'm not putting up paywalls, but if you're on my list and you're getting my weekly newsletter, you see calls to action, you see advertisements that I'm putting in it. Now, I'm not changing these ads up every time I send a newsletter. Instead, they're being randomly generated for you. So every week, you should be seeing different promotions. I'm not dictating that. I'm not saying this week I want to promote this. Instead, I have a system set up that is largely looking at you and what you've told me and what you've bought and saying, okay, there's 8 different offers that I have for you. And then it just randomly generates a number that will then assign you to either offer 2 or offer 6 or whatever else based on that. And at the root of it all is random number generation, which is at the root of this problem that the ConvertKit team brought to me yesterday. So the question is, how do you reliably and consistently generate a random number in ConvertKit? Well, I'm going to show you how easy it is to do that and how with just a few really minutes of setup time, you could be doing something similar, whether you want to rotate through offers or show like a paywall to a certain percentage of people, or just show a nice little like, hey, I wanted to get, I'm not sending this to everyone. I want to get your thoughts on X, Y, and Z before I get into the meat of this week's newsletter. Whatever your end goal, random number generation is how you do that. Okay, so let's start with what I think most people now who are doing any sort of random number generation with ConvertKit are doing. And what they're doing is they're using the current time to come up with a random number. So basically what's happening is you get the current time, you turn it into the current number of seconds. So what I mean by that is that there's this weird computer sciencey thing called the Unix timestamp. And what that means is it's the number of seconds that have gone by since the 1st of January, 1970. And that's a number that obviously grows with every passing second. So what people are doing is they're saying, let's get the current number of seconds divided by 9 or 10, and then figure out the remainder. So if we divide it by 10 and there's a remainder of 0, cool. Remainder of 3, cool. That should change with every passing second. So what that looks like in Liquid would be something like this. So every time I hit the space button, you'll see that the number changes. This is kind of like a random number generator. Now, it's not round robin. It's not remembering what was done in the past. It's kind of like rolling a dice or die, I should say, where you get a different number every time. But over the grand scheme of rolling dice, if you're rolling the same thing, 6-sided die, 1,000 times, there should be a 1 in 6 chance of, the number 2 showing up, right? So that's basically what is happening here. Now, there's an issue with this, and the issue is that computers are really quick, really fast. So I want to explain what I mean by this. So imagine, okay, this is what we're using, and we're sending it to our list of 1,000 people. But then you start to see, maybe you hear back from them that maybe like everyone is seeing the same thing that you were hoping would be random, or maybe no one is. And the reason for that is something like this. So you'll notice the numbers are all the same. These random, I'm looping through 1,000 times and doing this, but the numbers are all the same. And the reason they're the same is because all of this is happening within the same second. So ConvertKit sometimes can be a little slow at times for sending a massive email to your list, But sometimes it's not. Sometimes what's called their job queue is pretty empty, and you fire off a broadcast, and then a second later, which is awesome, there it is in your, sent to you, your test accounts, but also sent to your entire list. So if you're doing a random number generation thing using seconds, well, there's a good chance that everyone is, rolled the dice and got 3. And maybe you're saying if it's less than 5, show the paywall. Well, now everyone's seeing the paywall. So the seconds approach doesn't really work for the purposes of generating a random number. So what I recommend instead would be the nanosecond approach. So if you change this %s, so what's happening here is we're taking the current time and then we're turning it into the number of seconds. So let's make this really clear again. So there we go. This is number of seconds. So that's the number of seconds that have gone by since 1970. And you can see that every time I hit space, this goes up by 1. And then what I was doing is I was dividing by 10 to get the remainder, and that's how I was coming up with the random number. Now, the issue is when I do this, just keep it simple like this. You can see the same, this is all 1,000 are happening at the same second. So this isn't helping, right? So if we change this %s to a %9 capital N, this is the number of nanoseconds. So nanoseconds, computers aren't this quick. You can see that every time this loops, every time this goes through a different number, the number of nanoseconds changes. So this gives us a much better way of coming up with a random number. So in this case, what we could do would be something like this. So let's change this to 9n, divide by 10. What did I do wrong? Oh, there it is. Sorry, it's just cached. And here we can see that now we have a random number, each line between 1 and 10. Now remember, it's roll of the dice. So it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's a bit like if you go to the casino and play craps, they give you two dice and you throw them. Sometimes you're going to do really well. Well, all that means is that, you've had the right numbers hit again and again, but casinos are betting that over the grand scheme of things, there's a certain, what's called the house edge, which is the percentage that they can expect each number or, each number show up, which again, if it's a 6-sided die is 1 in 6 for each number, and they calculate their odds that way. So anyway, here we are, we're getting effectively a mostly random number between 1 and 10. Now, I want to show you something this got into the conversation that I had with Testing In ConvertKit of, well, what happens when we do this over, in this case, 1,000 times. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically just accumulating a counter for 2 groups. One of them is if it's less than 3, meaning it's 0, 1, or 2, they're going to go into the red group. And if it's above that, if it's 4 through 9, they're going to go into the blue group. And basically what that's going to give us is ideally a 30-70% split. So 30% should be in the red group, 70% should be in the blue group. And you can see down here that we're actually pretty close to that. So every time I hit space, it's going to recalculate. And we're pretty close. And sometimes, yeah, I mean, here, red group really, really did well. But give it a bit more. And you can see, again, how it just it hovers at 30-70, which is what we want. Again, it's not going to be exactly 30% and exactly 70%, but it's close enough. So this is basically what I advised the team at ConvertKit to do with this customer, is do something like this. And then, that'll give you that 30-70% split. And how you would do that is you would basically just do something like this ultimately. So let's get this back to 9. Random number. All we would need to do here is if I do append this. So what this is going to do, actually, I don't want to do this. My mistake. Don't want to append. This is going to make random number a number. That's random between 0 and 9. So if I want to say 30% see message A and 70% see message B, all I would need to do is just do something like if random number is less than 3, message A, else. So you'd basically just type this directly into ConvertKit. We can see here that message B is consistently coming up, but sometimes you get A because it's that 30-70% split. So this is what you would do. You could do it all in one simple line. You would basically just have this line up here, which is going to give you the number 0 to 9, and then check it that way. Now, if you want to make it simple, say you just want to make it a 50-50 split, you can change modulo 10 to modulo 2. And now we could just say if number is 0, it's B, or it's A, otherwise it's B. Yeah, I don't want to do so. If it's 1, I'm sorry, this is where I messed up. If it's 1, it's message A. If it's 2, it's message B. So again, I prefer doing modulo 10 here because this will give us 1 through 10. And then we can just do it this way. We can say, like, if you want to have multiple groups, you could say, like, if it's less than 3, then do A. Otherwise, if it's less than 6, you do B, and that'll give you like 3 groups you could do. But again, hopefully this makes some sense as to what we're doing. You're basically rolling the dice, and then depending on the number that comes out, which should be effectively a random number, you could then conditionally use if else's in ConvertKit to show different messages, to show different content, to show different ads, whatever you want to do. All right, hope this helps. And yeah, if you have any feedback or questions, feel free to reach out.